I I can't speak for all women. I know I
Yeah.
can speak just specifically to my
Mhm.
experience, and I felt like a failure
Mm,
with my miscarriage until I started researching miscarriages, what initially happened. And I just felt my body was defective. I'm not working. I tied a lot of my identity to my womb. So
mhm.
I already struggled with infertility. And so to have such a pregnancy loss was just devastating to my mental health because I felt something was wrong with my body. And when you start researching miscarriages, like 1 in 4 women have miscarriages. They're quite common. And I believe like 90% of those miscarriages happen in the first trimester.
Hello, and welcome back to the Holistic Health and Hormones podcast. Today's episode is an incredibly important and deeply moving conversation about women's health, miscarriage, infertility, reproductive trauma, and the silent expectations so many women carry every single day. Joining me is Kayla Brandstetter, an English instructor at Crowder College and published writer and a TEDx speaker, who's also the author of the book Don't Be an Athena. Her work explores women's health, narrative medicine, and cultural pressures placed on women going through pain and grief. In this conversation, we dive into the emotional realities behind miscarriage and infertility, the impact of not feeling heard within healthcare systems, and why women's stories deserve to be treated as evidence and not being dismissed or minimized. This episode is powerful, honest, validating, and I know one so many women will resonate deeply with. So whether you've personally experienced reproductive trauma, supported someone who has, or simply want to better understand the unseen emotional toll women carry today, this conversation is for you. So let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to the Holistic Health and Hormones podcast. Today, I'm super excited to have Kayla Brandstetter with us today, who is an English instructor at Crowder College. She's a TEDx speaker, an award-winning writer whose work has been published in more than 40 journals worldwide, and she is the author of Don't Be Athena, Women's Stories of Surviving Medical Misogyny, a forthcoming non-fiction book that amplifies women's voices and confronts issues of healthcare, inequality, reproductive trauma, and narrative erasure. Currently pursuing a Doctor of Education in Healthcare, her research centers on narrative medicine and how storytelling can improve patient care, particularly for women and underserved populations. Welcome, Kayla.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a bit about what inspired you to write Don't Be Athena.
A lifetime of experiences because I need to go back to the beginning. My mom had me at 16 in rural Missouri where tradition dictates so much of the culture. And she was forced to get married. And in many ways, we lived the stereotypical teen pregnancy life in rural America, in that it was poverty, it was domestic violence, and then living off of government assistance. My mom dropped out of school, but she didn't choose to get married. She chose to file for divorce and just get agency to write her own story. She achieved a GED, which is basically equivalent to a high school diploma in the United States. When I was 4 years old, she graduated from a 2-year college where I'm currently a professor at, which is like a full circle moment. And then when she remarried a man who was domestically violent, both physically, emotionally, and financially. But when I was 10, she filed for divorce. And when I was 13, she graduated from university with a degree in sociology. So I saw my mom just have grit and survival mode, and she helped dig us out of poverty. That shaped my journey because I wanted to do everything correct according to society. I graduated high school with honors. I attended university. I met my husband at university. I went for my master's degree, started my career, made sure I had health insurance. And when we decided it was time to have a baby, we suffered from unexplained infertility. It took roughly 3.5 years to get pregnant with my first daughter. And when I did get pregnant, they said I was gonna lose her, and I had to go on progesterone for the entire first trimester, and I just didn't know a lot about my body.
Mm,
I had a miscarriage with my second pregnancy, and then my third pregnancy, I had to undergo a procedure to check if I had a blockage in my fallopian tubes, and I did have a block in my left fallopian tube, and
mm.
I was able to ovulate, and I got pregnant shortly after that with my second daughter, but my third pregnancy. So I was open about my infertility, my miscarriages, and women would privately message me about their infertility issues, about the stigma that they were going through. And I think if you've gone through a miscarriage, you understand miscarriage. But I think if you haven't gone through a miscarriage, it's difficult to understand that type of grief and then the grief associated with infertility as a whole. And it wasn't just reproduction as far as infertility goes and miscarriage goes. It was also women who said, well, I don't want to be a mom and I'm judged just as harshly. And so
Mm,
this idea of crafting a book that wasn't too academic, I used narrative nonfiction for these women's stories to come to life. I wanted it to be accessible to all women. I wanted most women to see themselves in my book. I interviewed about 28 American women from New York to California in cities, rural areas, urban or suburban areas, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different education backgrounds, different religions, different ethnicities. And I wanted this common theme of despite our differences, we're all connected in these issues.
what did you find some of the common themes were like amongst all the women that you interviewed?
I have felt like even if they were upper middle class or poverty, just the lack of resources and lack of education, that seemed to be universal. Domestic violence seemed to be universal. It was I interviewed a woman who from New York City, Upper East Side, worked in the fashion industry, and her ex-husband was addicted to painkillers. So that idea of like addiction and domestic violence, financial abuse was fairly universal, and this idea of gaslighting ourselves.
Mm,
I had women, again, well-educated, upper middle class who chose to formula feed. I get that because I chose to formula feed, and just that feeling like a failure as a mom because you
yeah.
chose not to breastfeed your child and you went to formula.
Mm.
And there was a lot more common themes than that. Sexual assault was pretty common across the board, regardless of what a woman's socioeconomic or education background.
Yeah. I mean, from an energetic perspective, because obviously, as a natural health practitioner myself of over 15 years, I see common themes of people going through a lot of that. Obviously, some of their stories are pretty traumatic. But for one thing, it's like if your body is not feeling safe and, you've come from a background, even if you had inner child wounds, like you went through a lot with your mother, going through a lot growing up, and you've done well educationally. But when it comes to your body, right, it's a lot more sensitive. So a lot of women don't understand that having a baby is not like it looks all fine on paper, but there is so much more to bringing a life into this world. Like for me, I'm always teaching about not only the physical, but the mental, emotional, spiritual, and energetics is actually much more important when it comes to having a baby, making sure you're feeling safe, that, both couples, like both you and your partner are on the same thought, the same wavelength, you're supporting each other. And it's very hard when the woman is doing a lot of it and they're not having a supportive partner in a lot of cases.
Yeah, and knowing to feel safe. And I know so many women felt dismiss of their concerns or they didn't feel heard with their traumas. And I think that was universal as well, of wanting to make sure that they were feeling heard, feeling safe, feeling like their concerns were being taken seriously.
It's such a lonely journey too, I think, for many, because even though they can't speak to their partners about it, they don't want to burden friends and family and parents and all sorts of things. So when they go through things like miscarriage, they feel very alone in all of that. So why do you think miscarriage and infertility is still topics that many women feel they must suffer through in silence?
I I can't speak for all women. I know I
Yeah.
can speak just specifically to my
Mhm.
experience, and I felt like a failure.
Mm.
with my miscarriage until I started researching miscarriages, what initially happened. And I just felt my body was defective. I'm not working. I tied a lot of my identity to my womb. So I already struggled with infertility. And so to have such a pregnancy loss was just devastating to my mental health because I felt something was wrong with my body. And when you start researching miscarriages, like 1 in 4 women have miscarriages. They're quite common, and I believe like 90% of those miscarriages happen in the first trimester. So and it's just the body's way of letting you know this is not gonna be a successful pregnancy.
Yeah, it's a smart thing, your body. Like it knows, it's very intuitive, right? So it could be that or that there's a missing link. So we can go into a bit more of that later. But yeah, definitely. And it's understanding that, but it's still tough. And especially those that have gone through multiple miscarriages. I don't
Mhm.
think it makes it any easier if you miscarry at say 6 weeks or, at 12 weeks, where maybe for a lot of the women I've seen, they've gone to see a heartbeat at 6, 7 weeks. And then when it comes to 10 weeks, it's no longer grown. And there's a chromosomal abnormality. And if it happens multiple times, it is traumatic. And it is, yeah, it's this big emotional impact that is, yeah, so deep. And actually coming back from that for your body to feel safe and for you not to feel anxious. Because when I talk to my own women and then they've got that miscarriage in the background, it's happened before, as soon as they're pregnant again, they can't help but feel anxious and fearful.
Right.
And that energy is also not a safe environment, but it's all that pre-programming that they've already had.
Yeah, I don't think I had in my opinion, in my experience, I've had 3 pregnancies
Mhm.
and 2 successful children, but or 2 successful deliveries. I never felt safe or happy with any of my pregnancies. And because I've had friends who absolutely loved being pregnant. They were
Yeah.
so excited to be pregnant, and I'm happy for them. But when you're going through infertility, and with my first pregnancy, I'm told I was going to lose my daughter, and I had to go on extra hormones, like extra progesterone for the entire first trimester. But just that initial conversation from the doctor that said, if we don't see growth or heartbeat, we need to come up with like a plan B, whether it was a DNC or abortion or something, because it was going to be an unsuccessful pregnancy. And I remember counting down the weeks and reading up on Google of, okay, if I can just make it to 28 weeks, there's a 90% chance of survival. So it was almost like a survival mode week by week to know
Day by
when.
day, right? When you're
Yeah.
counting like the rest.
And then when the baby is like actually asleep and you don't feel them move, you're like, oh, okay, is there something
Mhm.
wrong with the baby? And then I had the miscarriage, and my 3rd pregnancy, it was successful. I didn't have to go on extra hormones, but I was I had morning sickness the entire 9 months, hospitalized at month 3 for dehydration. So I just felt like I don't do pregnancy well. I would much rather give birth than do pregnancy. When I had my 2nd daughter, it was the easiest labor and delivery. It was like that was simple compared to
Oh, I'm
39
opposite
weeks.
with you. I'm the opposite. Good pregnancy, but terrible birth.
Yeah,
So,
I had a terrible pregnancy, but I'm like, "Oh, I would give birth." Like, that
I love a good
that was
song.
actually easy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's just so much, I think, unintentional societal grief that gets associated with miscarriage and infertility that gets minimized. Like, it gets
Mhm,
shut down. Even with the IVF clinics, I find that women that are going through IVF specifically, and that is almost like a miscarriage in itself, right? It's kind of they've put so much financial, especially if there's a big financial stake in place, mentally, emotionally, because that 2-week wait is just like their body is anxious as anything. Because when you're naturally conceiving, it's like, well, you're not feeling it because just like, whether it's another month, but IVF is like everything is riding on it, especially when it's like costing $15,000 to $20,000. And it is just, and then it doesn't say it's a failed cycle or whatever. There's no support. I feel that there is still so much lack of support for women, unless they're finding Facebook groups and there's a bit of a, but you're not really knowing those people. I don't think there's enough in-person support for, whether it's in where you are in the States or even in here in Australia, there's still not a lot of support. We're in first world countries. So can you imagine there was a podcast I did with a fertility specialist that came from Africa. She goes, they don't even get the preconception care, let alone dealing with the grief. Like they are like hours and hours away from any sort of medical care at all. So I think that just being in our modern society, I can't believe there's still not a lot of support around grief that is associated with, miscarriages, failed cycles, just support for women in general going through this.
I believe there needs to be more research in like postpartum depression
Yes.
after miscarriage,
That's
because I
mm,
didn't realize we associate postpartum depression after a successful pregnancy, but there is this grieving process with a loss of a child, regardless of, what week that child was lost. And your body is going through a lot. You have a normal cycle, you're pregnant, you lost the pregnancy, and now your body's preparing for pregnancy again. And that's just an emotional roller coaster. And you're navigating all of those hormones and body changes amongst your grief.
yeah. There's a lot. There's definitely not enough support and education, like you said. And for me, I think the education piece really starts even earlier than when when a couple is trying to conceive. I think what I would like is more education, I think from even late teens, early 20s.
I agree.
For sure, if your whole body is going through certain hormones, like you've got PCOS, endo, you want to do all of your fertility checks way early on instead of actually then going, okay, I'm ready to have a baby and realize then now we're starting all the investigative work, which is what I do with couples, but they're already well into their conception process. This should be done with women more so in their late teens, early 20s, so that when they are ready or they do want to become a mum one day, they know what's going on and it can happen quickly. Not just for the women, the men. I have seen for infertility, it's actually the male factored infertility more so in the last sort of 5 to 10 years than it has been a lot of the women. And so when it comes to unexplained or, having infertility, then it's really about getting to the root cause. Well, I'm talking from a holistic lens. I mean, some of the doctors, when they go for unexplained infertility, they diagnose things differently. Then before you know it, a lot of the couples have jumped straight into IVF. And then it's cycle after cycle and a lot of that emotional stress and financial, physical, mental stress, which is already on top of, feeling stressed out on the journey. It's a lot.
So clinical and so cold. When I interviewed a woman who chose IVF in my book, and that's one thing she said. One, she did get judged because her faith she's Jewish, and it had such a central role into who she was. And she said people would approach her and said, well, if God wanted you to have a baby, you would have one. Why are you doing IVF when it's unnatural? And think about medicine, so much of medicine is unnatural today. Organ harvesting
Yes.
and like blood transfusions, like all these that help us stay alive are unnatural. And that's how she took it, as like science exists. But on top of this stigma of not being able to conceive naturally and seeking the help of the medical field and science, she said it was just so cold and so clinical. Like nothing about it was because being able to create a child with someone that you love, there's this intimacy affiliated with it. And when you go through IVF and you're injecting yourself with hormones and you're checking your ovulating cycle, and like the whole process is just, she said, just so cold. Like she would go through it again and again and again to bring her daughter here. She does not regret it at all. Her daughter is here. She's like 21, 22 years old, just graduated from university.
So she started
Uh,
very early. I mean, even back then, 20 years ago,
yeah.
IVF wasn't as common as it was in the last 10 years now, right? Especially in a very close-knit Jewish community where everyone talks, everyone knows what's going on. You can't keep much private
Yeah, and then
stuff.
she ended up having a C-section, so she just felt like everything with her pregnancy was just not
The norm. Well, what we
the
consider the
norm.
norm, right? It's like get married, fall pregnant straight away, have children easily and effortlessly. Yeah.
And I
And yeah.
interviewed another woman who she ended up having a hysterectomy in her 30s because of her endometriosis, and she came from she's Korean American. Her parents immigrated from Korea to the United States, and she said that growing up, she just didn't really have an open dialogue with her reproduction. And so because she felt like if you went to the gynecologist before getting married, there was just this like stigma that you're sexually active before married, and that brought dishonor to her family.
Mhm.
And so she just didn't have an honest conversation about her reproductive system. And she had endometriosis for years and years and years. And so by the time she was in her 30s and it was time to have children, the endometriosis had done so much damage to her reproductive organs that she had to have a hysterectomy, and that there was this grieving process associated with the wanting the child and that child no longer existing. They did keep her ovary so she could do like surrogacy if she wanted to, but she just is now, she wanted to be interviewed. She is under an alias because she wanted to still, she wanted her story shared, but in a private, maintaining her privacy. But she's a big advocate of kind of like back to what you're saying. We need to start having these conversations about women's reproduction much earlier and remove the
Teenage
shame
years.
attached to
Teenage
it.
years. Yeah. Yeah, and that's another medical model. Like, even if a lot of teenagers are going through painful periods, they may
Mhm.
open up to their mum and their parents. Some depends from the culture. They don't know much. A lot of women in general don't know a lot about reproductive. So then they go to the GPs and they trust what they say, and before you know it, they're on the contraceptive pill, or they have been, they're given the wrong information, and so then they're going through decades of this before then wanting to start a family and almost having to reverse a lot of what they've been doing for the last, couple of decades.
Yeah, because of the journey I have been through with this book of the women I've interviewed, I have an 11-year-old and a 6-year-old. And so I had the period talk with my 11-year-old when she was 8 years old, because I know just young girls are having their periods at younger ages.
Yeah, I
It
start at
wasn't
8.
about, yeah, it wasn't just
Mm.
about preparing her for what her body was going through. I wanted her, because I remember that talk and I felt like I needed to hide it. It was associated with like this shame. It was dirty. And I did not want that. There was this embarrassment of what my body was doing. And I'm big about teaching my daughters to empower other women. So if someone in her class starts her period and nobody told her about it, my
Yes.
daughter is now prepared to have that conversation with that young girl. And she already has period products made for tweens in her bag so she can provide the necessary products to the next girl. And now she's 11. She is kind of going through puberty. She's getting awkward about her body. But I told her, like, if your periods are too hard, like, if they're too painful, you need to let me know,
Yes. It's important comment.
because then
Mm.
we need to figure out. And I want my daughters, kind of back to where you were saying, we need to have these conversations when they're late teens, early 20s. If my daughters are in their late 20s and 30s and they just don't wanna be a mom, like, that's their choice. I want it to be their choice. I don't want them suffering through endometriosis for years, and they didn't feel comfortable coming to me to where I could help be proactive and protect their reproductive organs.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Like, I've got an 8-year-old daughter as well and a 10-year-old son, and they're so different. But yes, I think it's very important to start having these conversations. Sometimes she might see me with a pad. And it was very funny, like even like a year or two ago, she goes, "Mummy, why do you wear nappies sometimes?" Like they're just so innocent because it's like they think it's all strange, or they may see like, sometimes a bit of blood around, like, they'll see things and they'll be like, "What's all this about, Mummy?" And it's about, when having those honest conversations with your daughters. And I think in this day and age, we're a lot more open in, the way we speak, but a lot of cultures are still very closed off about feeling safe to talk to their own mothers about their reproductive system and hormones.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's, like, one small step at a time,
Yeah.
because in a lot of cultures, it's still associated with secrecy, and
Yeah.
they are kind of removed from the community when they're on their periods, and I think it's just one step at a time.
So why do you think from like a perspective of just women, they just keep going, keep functioning despite all of this emotional and physical and mental pain that they're going through? Like women, I think are really resilient. Like even though we go through that, we may go through a period of grief and deal with it in our own ways, but we come back and we keep trying again and again. Did you see that in some of the themes with the people you interviewed? Like we're just such, I think we're much just, I feel like we're a stronger race than the men. We go through so much more ups and
Yeah,
downs
I think.
with our hormones. Like the men, they have a little something and they complain, and it's like, oh, if you went through what we went through every month. Yeah.
and then go through what we go through every month. And if you end up with a cold or the flu, you still need to make sure your kids are taking a bath and getting to bed. The laundry is finished. Women are
Yeah.
resilient, and I wanted my book to be a book about survival, just celebrating how resilient women are, because women do. They're going through all of these traumas and they're still showing up.
Yeah. I mean, we need to. I think we need to just keep going, keep fighting. And if it's a child that we want at the end of the day, we don't usually give up, right? I think we keep going until there's a reason to give up. And I've seen a lot of women even trying to have a baby now in their mid 40s. And they're like, look, I said to them, as long as your periods are coming, you've still got a period every month, everything's looking good, there's always still a chance that you can still conceive. There are people who conceive well into their late 40s. Even some stories of women who conceive naturally even at 50, right? If you've got a period, your body's healthy, it can happen. And I think that education piece comes from, really starting sooner. And so what would sort of compassionate, ethical healthcare for women really look like? I think if we were to start something like ethical, compassionate healthcare, what would that be? What would that look like, do you think, in your opinion?
I'm a big advocate for storytelling. My background is in the humanities. And I think when ethical healthcare in terms of women, it begins with just creating a safe space for women to feel heard. I think we do a lot of talking, and I just don't think we're being heard. We're saying, hey, I'm having this pain. And I don't think certain doctors truly understand, okay, I'm in pain. This isn't just a period pain. I'm in pain. And at least in the United States, women shouldn't be seeing 4, 5, 6 different doctors for a doctor to finally believe that she is in pain.
Yes. Yes.
I would
For
love
sure.
to see just being compassionate toward a woman's body.
And
I
not
don't know
take
about
patience.
Australia, at least the United
Yeah.
States, we're just now studying the woman's body. We haven't been studying the woman's body except like maybe the early 90s, and we're medical schools. I think Washington University in St. Louis, they're studying perimenopause and menopause as part of
Mm,
like, we're actually starting to have these
right now,
conversations.
it's crazy. It's 2026, right? And you think we're just starting to understand like apparently endometriosis takes on average 7 to 8 years to get diagnosed. So
Yes,
I
and
spoke
then
to a
so much
client of
pain.
yeah, similar to your story, there was a client of mine who I worked with, and she was living in rural Australia, and basically had seen all the doctors there were men, and she had had painful periods from teenage years. Basically, she would be out of school for like 3 days every month. And yet the doctors kept saying, it's just normal, it's in your head, just basically toughen up, take a Panadol and you'll be fine. And so for years and years, until she found out exactly it had already progressed so badly, and in her late 20s, she had to have a hysterectomy, very similar. And it's like, if someone had listened and someone had gotten to them earlier or done the diagnoses, then it would be a completely different story for so many women and couples. And it is a big grief. It's almost like, going through that and being able to work through that and understand that, there are options, obviously, surrogacy and all of that, but it's a letting go of something that you will never be able to, carry your own child in that way. And
Yeah,
that's tough.
and same thing with PCOS. I know they recently just
Yeah.
changed the name of PCOS. I have friends who suffer from that condition, and it took years to be diagnosed with PCOS. And I think they're insulin resistant. It's difficult to lose weight with PCOS because it is a hormonal issue, and there
So they're
is
calling it PMOS. Yes. Like
it
the
just
metabolic.
changed it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
changed it like recently, like
But
this year sometime. It's
and
not polycystic because, as I said, it's the only one aspect of the whole syndrome, right? And so, yes, now they're giving it a new name because it's a metabolic condition rather.
yeah,
Yeah.
and women struggle to lose weight. And if you're going to the doctor and the doctor's saying, hey, eat right, exercise, and lose weight,
Mhm.
well, that's not the right advice to give to somebody suffering from this condition.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really hard. And so I think it's really just, what changes would you love to see? I mean, I've got some I could list, but what changes would you love to see happen in the fertility and reproductive healthcare over the next decade? Like now we're starting to get a bit more education, but even with social media and everything the way it is, people are still feeling now there's too much, I think also. And I find that my clients are very overwhelmed. They're
Yeah.
confused. That's the opposite. We went from no information to too much information. They're just like, I don't know what to listen to anymore.
Seeing some changes that I'm so excited about, just with my daughter, and her friends and her school, they are having open conversations about periods. I'm seeing more and more free period products being offered in public spaces.
Yes.
So in that regard, I think we're heading in the right direction. Where I would like to see, and I can't speak for the United States collectively as a whole because this specific issue is state by state. And unfortunately, the
Mhm.
state of and even then, it's like school by school. My sex education when I was in high school was almost non-existent, and it
Yeah.
was abstinence only. Don't have sex if you don't want to be a teen mom or get
Yeah.
an STD, and you just don't understand your body. Whereas in other states that have comprehensive sex education, the teen pregnancy is down, the STDs and just understanding their bodies is just. I wish that would not be a state issue and it be just a country issue of just cross the board offer a comprehensive sex education where, and I'm going to include men or young men,
Yeah, yeah, young men.
they
Yeah,
can
I think so.
understand the body. I think women need to understand their bodies. I think it's important for women to understand what a young boy's or a young man's body is going through, just as much as I think we need young men to understand what a woman's body is going through. I do think our young men need to sit in a class and understand what a period does and ovulating. And that way reproduction is just not a mystery to men either. So I'm hoping and in some states we are heading in that direction, but I would love, like, I live in Missouri, we are quite conservative and we have like strict abortion laws, so they don't want to have these conversations, but we need to have these conversations.
There's still, like, in this day and age, there is also rules being put in with abortions being made to feel guilty and all of that, right? It's like if the woman has rights to her own body, yes, I mean, they should be able to make the medical choices, but that's a debate for different states. And that's tough on the woman going through certain things. It makes it, yeah, extra tough on them if they don't have a supportive team and people around them to actually, you know, be able to support her decisions in what she's making for her own body.
Yeah, and just educating what her options are if she finds herself with an unintended pregnancy, what options do you have?
Yeah.
And I don't think we're educating and again, I feel like I'm generalizing, and I don't want to
Yeah.
or make
Yeah.
a statement on that's a fallacy because I'm going off of the state of Missouri and in a rural area of state of Missouri, and that is not reflective of the entire country. But at least with rural women in conservative traditional areas, I don't think we do an effective job of educating women on their bodies and their choices when they find themselves in certain situations.
Yeah. And I think adding to that, like, I think that should be rolled out to not only just not just state by state, but
Mm.
countrywide, especially in first world countries, even more so even in the underdeveloped countries, because they have no idea. Like, they have no idea even on sort of, contraception and all the different options around that. But in Australia too, like, we have state by state, but they have rules, but I think it could be rolled out Australia wide as well. But I think on top of that, it's not just understanding about how your body works, reproductive hormones, but also a big piece on what I'm seeing is healthy eating. It's understanding how can we eat, like, especially like you said, endo, PCOS, metabolic, there's a lot of toxins, there's a lot of different educational pieces that almost involves, like, when you are doing, like, I know my kids, they're 8 and 10 and they have science class, they have HSIE, like history, even in science, to maybe add like something every single week, even if it's for 10 minutes, or to give them that education. Especially, I think it should start like younger, like I said, 9 or 10 years old. and also educating them on diet and lifestyle and the environmental toxins. Like a lot of people are vaping even well into their adulthood. Like most of the men I see with poor sperm health, a lot of them are exposed to toxins, they're smoking, they're vaping, and that is significantly contributing to a lot of the infertility and miscarriages for sure, because if the sperm health isn't good, the egg quality isn't great, it's going to result, in a miscarriage because the embryo just isn't healthy, especially if they're going for IVF. Like there's a lot of work we can do for preparation, which is where my piece comes in, but it's never too late, but I wish it would start with people well into, so they're eating right in their teens, so they don't develop PCOS and consistently have the endometriosis come back and doing multiple surgeries. It's all of that. So on top of understanding health hormones, it is so much more like, I think in general, just as a society in America and Australia, our health is so much worse than it is. And the whole piece around eating better, understanding how to eat right will make a big difference to your health hormones as well as just, long-term health outcomes.
I agree. We need to address that better. My daughter is 11. She's an elite athlete. She's on a competitive softball team. We're playing softball almost every weekend. She wants to be a professional softball player. And part of that I tell her is you have to take care of your body. If you want to go play Division 1 softball when you graduate high school, they are giving you this scholarship and paying you to take care of your body. And so we
Yes.
do have those conversations of taking care of your body. If you want to be a high performing an adult, not just an athlete, just an adult, you do need to learn to take care of your body. And that, at least in rural areas in the United States, I think people want to make a good decision. But unfortunately, when we see like the type of stores that are available to them in such a short amount of distance, it's access to the heavily processed food. So it could be a
Yes.
5 to a 10-minute drive, and they have access to these foods that can be toxic versus maybe going 30 minutes to an hour and having access to fresher foods. Well, they're obviously going to drive. I think we just need to give people the opportunity to make a good decision by having healthier food more accessible to people.
Yeah, we definitely are as a whole, our whole society. I don't think we're healthy. I think we're a lot sicker than we were even in that, even in our parents' generations. There's so much more processed foods. I mean, like I would go to the supermarket and I think it's not my imagination, but like I live in, sort of Sydney city, but you can see like in the shopping centers, the lanes are getting smaller and they're packed with more and more processed foods. There are so many choices of processed foods. It is crazy. It's aisles and aisles, and the aisles are getting smaller because they're putting more and more things on the shelves. I don't know if you've seen that in the States, but I've definitely noticed it here in Sydney. All right. So, look, what advice would you give to women currently feeling dismissed, unseen, or emotionally exhausted? Like from what you've heard in your stories, how do you feel these women could, really be more seen and, be able to express their emotions a bit better? What sort of support would you advise them if they're going through this?
Yeah, I think journaling is a great
Mhm.
tool. Just writing, getting out your emotions. I journaled significantly when I was going through infertility and being angry because, at least in my circle, I didn't have anybody who had gone through infertility. I didn't
Right.
know anybody who had gone through miscarriage. So I was angry and I needed to get that anger out. But it was difficult to find somebody who understood what that anger was. And I think people, if you haven't gone through it, it's difficult, I think, to have compassion and be empathetic. I had people, even women, tell me I needed to get over it, that
Wow.
yeah.
The last thing
So
you want to hear, isn't it, when you're going through something? How long is over it? Is it 3 weeks, 3
well,
months,
that's
3
it.
years?
I think when it comes to the grieving process, can you really put a timestamp on that? And for some women, they were able to, after having a miscarriage, they were able to try again quickly. I was not that type of person after I had my miscarriage. I didn't want to try quickly because I had that anxiety of I wanted to be pregnant, but then I had the anxiety of getting pregnant and then the stress of what if I miscarry again? It just I had to mentally be in the right headspace to get pregnant again because it was so much stress and anxiety associated with it. But I definitely think journaling to just get some of the emotions out. I know I can't speak for Australia, but in the United States, go get a second opinion. If you feel dismissed by a provider, go find a different provider who is able to hear you. Hopefully, the Australian network is not as complex as the American of
But I think
health insurance. I can only see a provider that's
yeah,
connected to this health
yeah.
insurance.
We're a little bit easier here, even GPs. And I think, look, we have, if you don't have enough money, you can go through the Medicare system here, which is amazing. It's Australia-wide. Anyone who's a resident has Medicare. And if your GP thinks that, you need some counseling or psychology sessions, you can get 5 or up to 10. So you can do plans of either 5 or 10 free counseling sessions for those. Depends on different grief, but yeah, grief in general, like whether it's a loss. But yes, we have some great medical plans that the doctors or GPs can actually, write you if you need to. So I think we're several steps ahead of the States, and hopefully you catch up. But yes, it's still it's still quite a step for them to want to speak to people. I think that's the first step, is recognizing that you need help, and secondly, getting the right support. Even if you, like, I do a lot of coaching with my women who've gone through it, and just helping to release the emotional anxiety, fear, all of that, guilt and hurt. It's huge, like a lot of those emotions, but then being able to change and rewire the thinking and the mental emotional state. So, moving out, there's lots of great tools. Like, I love using hypnotherapy as one, but yeah, I mean, there's some great people. So seeking the help, from doctors, if you want to speak to a counselor, psychologist, there are those available. And then some of the sort of more holistic health coaches like myself that actually is trained in mental emotional trauma healing and that. But finding help, I think, is recognizing that we need to be able to move through it. Some people want to do on your own, like journaling might be a great way. And if you feel like, then fine, but find something to express and release that.
Yeah.
The emotional.
Journaling, going for a hike, doing
Yeah.
art, finding other women, getting a network. And I agree, recognizing that you need help. And I think as women, I really struggled to know that I needed help of like, how far am I going to allow my mental health to decline before I start
Hmm.
recognizing that I need help? Because I felt like I've been in survival mode. And if I had shown like this moment of weakness, then I don't know, I just felt like being strong was admitting that even though I desperately needed help,
Mm,
like finding the time to know how am I gonna have help. And I think you have to make the time for
that's
your
right.
mental health.
Yeah.
And if you have the resources and the access to address it, then you need to address it. And I love that Australia recognizes the counseling sessions.
Yeah. And it's a bit
Certain
easier now
states.
online. Like, I guess, even in rural now, if you've got internet access, there is some great, there is now, we are more connected than we've ever been. So, and, with social
That
media, look,
is.
it is good. Like, it's great in some extent, even though people are fearful, they now have, AI isn't a counselor, but it's good that some people can even use those tools, and they're free. So, there is more help than there was years ago. That's for sure.
We can there's a 988 that Americans can call, and it's the, like, mental health and suicide
Oh, we have
hotline.
similar,
It'll give
similar.
you a
Yeah.
direct contact
Yeah.
to a mental health professional where you can kinda talk for about 20 minutes, 30
Mm.
minutes, and see if you need some help. And that's a free resource. And I know certain states in the United States, again, it's a state issue, and it
Yeah,
drives
that's
me nuts. It
right.
should not be a state
No,
issue. It
we're
should be a
Australia-wide.
federal issue.
Yeah, no, it shouldn't be. We've got some great hotlines like Beyond Blue, and there are some other, I'm sure if you Google them, but I know one like Beyond Blue that is like Australia-wide. You can call, and basically it's like a grief counseling, mental health. And I think that's definitely needed. No, it shouldn't be a state by state thing. But I don't know. Hopefully that changes one day. But look, what message do you have? Do you hope readers can take away from, like, don't be Athena? Don't. Yeah.
I want readers to see that these stories are survival stories. They're not stories of of being victims. These are women who have survived. And I remember going through infertility and miscarriage and feeling so alone and isolated. And I'm good at masking. So I would put on, like, I would go to work, I have a smile on my face, I'm acting like nothing is wrong when a lot is wrong. And I don't want women to mask. I don't want them to mask their pain. I don't want them to mask their emotional pain. And I want them to know that whatever they're going through, they're going to get through it. And I want these to be stories of hope. I don't want women to feel isolated. I want women to see themselves in this and realize you're going to get through whatever you're going through.
It's amazing. So if every woman listening today truly felt seen, heard, and believed in, their own pain and, getting over the grief, how different do you think, women's health would look?
If they felt seen and
Yeah,
visible,
heard.
well,
Yeah.
I think the world would be a better place. I'm ready for matriarchy to take over. If we could better, I'm a firm believer in, if we want to do what's best for children, we need to better support women.
Yes, for sure.
Supporting women is creating a better future for our children.
And if the women have the tools, we could pass them on to if we have female offerings as well.
Yes. And I think it starts with listening to women, and women shouldn't just live through their pain. And we deserve to have our bodies researched. We deserve to not be dismissed. We deserve to have proper resources in place. I'm not only should we take care of the reproduction and the pregnancy, but we need to take care of mothers after they have the baby. Like, we need to take care of women, the postpartum, and addressing that, because if you want to do what's best for the baby, we need to take care of mom. And if we can actually have women feel heard and seen, the world would just be a better place. I think generational curses would stop, and we would just be creating a much better future for our children.
I mean, having a child, it's a whole tribe. If you talk to some of the cultures, there's a whole supportive system. But a lot of times here, women basically give birth and they're all alone. I mean, they might have their husbands, but they might take a week or two off and then they're back at work. It's very lonely for first-time moms. It's a whole different conversation with postnatal depression.
Yeah, and they're overwhelmed.
Very overwhelming.
They feel like they have to do everything. And at least I felt that way. I felt I do everything. I went back to work with my first daughter. I went back to work 7 weeks, and then I went back to work.
Oh, that was quick.
After 5 weeks with my second. So I went back. Yeah, I returned to work. And my maternity leave started the moment that the baby was born. Wow. So there's not a lot of preparation. And with my second daughter, I was on bed rest for 2 weeks. But again, I just feel like society, if we can listen to women, hear women, and provide better support for women, it would just be better, and our children would thrive because of it.
Amazingly said. Thank you so much, Kayla, for sharing, your stories and, your opinions and intake on all of this. It really matters. And I think more women need to know that, that help is there. You just have to know where to look, but just acknowledging that and know that, you have to look after yourself before you can look after anyone else.
Yes. Yes. Give yourself some grace.
Yeah, amazing. Don't be hard on yourself. I think we're so hard on ourselves. It's tough. It's a tough world, and we can be so hard on ourselves as we beat ourselves up all the time, which doesn't make it easier.
We do, and it's okay to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much, Kayla. And I'll love to put the link. So if anyone would love to read your book, they can get a copy of that. But yes, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing, your stories with us. What an incredible and powerful, heartfelt conversation. I think one of the biggest takeaways from today's episode is this: women should not have to suffer silently in order to be seen as strong. Whether it's infertility, miscarriage, chronic pain, hormonal struggles, or simply the emotional weight of constantly having to hold it together, every woman deserves compassionate care, validation, and to feel genuinely supported. So if you do need support with your health and fertility journey, then please reach out to myself or someone who can help. You don't need to feel alone. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who may need to hear this conversation today. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or tag us so we can continue bringing more awareness to these important, powerful conversations around women's health and healing. You can connect with Kayla and follow her work surrounding her book, Don't Be an Athena, through her socials. And thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Holistic Health and Hormones podcast.